This was today in Russia. This happened on at least 3 different major TV providers in Russia today. The grid looks at first like the normal rundown of channels and shows. But if you go, for example, to Channel 1, if you go to any of the other big state-sponsored TV channels, it looks on the grid like every single program has the same name. For all the channels, for all the time slots, all the shows now have the same name. I mean, if you don't read Russian, you can see that they're all the same. I don't read Russian, but we had it translated. It turns out, according to your TV today in Russia, every single show on every single station and every time slot was titled, "On Your Hands is the Blood of Thousands of Ukrainians and Hundreds of Their Murdered Children. TV and the authorities are lying. No to war." That was the title of every show on Russian television today, according to everybody's TV grid when they turned on their TVs. Somebody hacked at least 3 of the biggest cable TV providers in Russia today. So that is what it looked like all over Russia when people went to flip on the tube to see what was on, to see what the options were. Also today, a fairly major Russian news outlet, one called Lenta, L-E-N-T-A. This is their website, lenta.ru. And today, same day that somebody hacked all the TVs in Russia, today somebody also rewrote what appeared to be dozens of headlines and dozens of articles on the Lenta News website. Now, as you know, as we've been reporting here for the last couple of months, no independent media is allowed to operate anymore in Russia. Putin has made it literally a crime punishable by 15 years in prison, to report on his war in Ukraine or even to call it a war. But look at what the Lenta website looked like earlier today in Russia. Now, this is with English translation, so you can see what these headlines look at. But, oh, boy, wow, this isn't normal. Vladimir Putin lied about Russia's plans in Ukraine. Putin unleashed one of the bloodiest wars of the 21st century. These are all the headlines on the news website today. Record spending on the army did not help Russia defeat Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense lied to the relatives of those killed on the cruiser Moskva, that big Russian naval ship that was sunk by a Ukrainian missile. Also this one, Russia completely destroyed the city of Mariupol. Russia leaves the corpses of its soldiers in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is afraid to reveal the truth about his family. Putin turned the state into the main robber, meaning like the main thief of Russians. Vladimir Putin has turned into a pathetic dictator and paranoid. Russia threatens to destroy the whole world. Zelensky turned out to be cooler than Putin. War makes it easier to cover up failures in the economy. Putin must go. He unleashed a senseless war and is leading Russia into the abyss. Again, this was all today. Those were all separate headlines today on one of the biggest pro-Kremlin state-controlled news sites in Russia. And it wasn't just the headlines that they changed. Each one of those that I just described to you, each one of those headlines I just read goes to a full article that has also been rewritten. I mean, in a country where they do not allow journalism anymore, they do not allow criticism of the government and especially of the war, these sentences posted today on a Russian news site, these were like a DEFCON 1 level threat to the state. Look at this. Quote, Russian President Vladimir Putin bears full responsibility for the senseless and bloody war against Ukraine. Guided by far-fetched pretexts about threats to Russia, the head of state plunged 2 neighboring peoples into a war in which there will be no winners, only losers. The president's decision will cost the country isolation, poverty, and a rollback to the very 90s that Putin loves to scare Russians with. In more than 20 years of his reign, he has turned into a dictator who began to believe in conspiracy theories and who lost touch with reality. Right now, Putin is depriving millions of Russians of their future and taking the lives of innocent Ukrainians. Vladimir Putin must immediately stop the war and resign. It is one thing to read that in a Western news source, or to read that in any news source in the world anywhere other than in Russia, but to read that in Russia? But again, today, that was a Russian major news site today, altered to include that article and dozens of others like it. And if you started going through them, you noticed that there were a few things that were consistent in each of the new articles that was posted. For example, near the top of each of the articles that was posted on this Russian news site today, there was a disclaimer. warning that this had been posted without the permission of the news organization, saying that it was definitely going to be taken down. So if you want to read this, take a screenshot of it immediately because this won't last. And indeed, that disclaimer was true. All those articles and headlines were almost immediately taken down off that Russian news site today. But they were up there for long enough that the great and good people at the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, they captured and saved all of it. They've got screenshots. They've got the historical record of what those news sites looked like when the truthful anti-Putin stuff was posted just for moments. And in this case, what's fascinating is that we know who did it. Two journalists, two young journalists who used to work for Lenta, for this news organization, they say that they did it. They have reportedly fled Russia. They are outside Russia personally. They apparently still had logins to access the news site, so that is how they did it. They obviously prepared all this material, logged in, uploaded everything, logged out, and got out. But they posted today identifying themselves by name as the people who did it, Igor Polyakov and Alexandra Miroshnikova. They gave their names. They stood up and said, we're the ones who did this. And then they said, quote, we are looking for work and lawyers and probably political asylum. And then they sign off with this, quote, do not be afraid. Do not be silent. Resist. You are not alone. We are many. The future is ours. F war. Peace to Ukraine. And we do not know where those two brave Russian journalists are tonight, the ones who did that. Again, it has been reported that they are outside Russia, but we do not know where they are. We also don't know who hacked all the TVs in Russia today either. But man, this is living manifest hope that bravery is contagious, that dictatorships are brittle, that they have to criminalize journalism and criticism of all kinds, because they know it's powerful, because they know they can't survive the truth.